I'm Charlotte Jones, co-host of the John Telford Detroit Show, coming to you every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock on Wjzz Cool Tv. Also streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Dr. John Telford is a former Detroit Public Schools superintendent, a former world-class athlete, conqueror of Olympic champions, a championship track coach, poet, newspaper columnist, a longtime civil rights crusader, and author of 7 books. Creative Insubordination, What Old Men Know, The Will Robinson Story, The Poetic Prancings of Mad John, The Poet Emperor of Earth, and his explosive autobiography, A Life on the Run. Plus, another upcoming poetry book, Athletes, Activism, and Apple Boughs, a Detroit poetic epic. His books are available on Amazon.com or by calling 313-460-8272. That's 313-460-8272.
Thank you.
Dr. Telford has been called a legend and also a lightning rod for controversy, a recipient of the City Council Spirit of Detroit Award and the Joe Louis Foundation Spirit of the Champ Award. He was named Wayne State University's Alumnus of the Year, and a Detroit track is named for him. His email is drjohnttelfordedd@aol.com. That's dr.johntelfordedd@aol.com. Dr. Telford also has a show on WCHB AM 1340 that airs on Saturdays at 9:30 in the morning and Mondays at 6:30 in the evening. That's on WCHB AM 1340, Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. and Mondays at 6:30 p.m. And now, without further ado, I present to you that old native Detroiter, the one and only Dr. John Telford.
Thank you, Charlotte Jones,
You're welcome.
a.k.a. Char J., author of A Ain't Always for Apple, an adult alphabet book. A Ain't Always for Apple. And this book is really going to sell, Char. It's really going to sell when you get a manager. You need to get a manager because you're going to sell this book, believe me. My name is Detroit. I'm a blue-collar town. Blue salt melts my mid-March snow. Speedy cars and sprinters spring from me. I father fierce fighters and funky music. In a Motown moment, I can spit the blues right back in a bureaucrat's eye. Have you never seen blue salt? No complex chemistry here, only the old color of a new sky, and there's a new sky dawning on Detroit today because we've got Bill Hoover in the station today.
Welcome.
Bill Hoover, that aficionado of basketball. You know, he was gonna interview me about track today, and I was gonna interview him about basketball. But this is not a show that's long enough to do that, so we got to have him on more than once, and maybe we'll just concentrate on basketball today. But you know, I want to share with you a poem before I introduce Bill Hoover, because it reminds me of a lot of my guests, and it particularly reminds me of Bill Hoover. And the poem is The Values of Verse. Verse comes to us by pen or voice. We thus can always take our choice. Let me be also sure to mention that verse will gain us righteous vengeance via deft poetic arts that can topple oligarchs. Verse will clearly, plainly lay out what we poets dare to say out, like gentle mewling lambs no more, but rather with a fearsome roar, as from some cacophonic corps of lions. And we have a lion who stands for basketball, who reports basketball, who is one of the best friends of Detroit basketball, and who is a historian of Detroit basketball, Bill Hoover. So, Bill, welcome to the John Telford Detroit Show on WCHB AM. No, we're not on WCHB. I always do that. Well, I'm on WCHB too, AM 1340. I'm on WCHB AM 1340 every Saturday morning at 9:30 and every Monday evening at 6:30. But today We are on WJZZ Cool TV, internet television. So, Bill, welcome to the John Telford Detroit Show.
Thank you, Dr. Telford. Thank you, Chargé.
So tell us a little bit about yourself to begin with, okay?
I'm a 55-year-old, just former Detroit Public School teacher, but I'm going to go right back. I've done 31 years over on the east side and coached some basketball along the way over at East Catholic High School and Kettering High School, Macomb Community College, and Oak Community College, and Grosse Pointe North and Barber, various places. But
sound like me. I mean, I coach everywhere, you know. But track was my sport that I mainly coached. But
got a website called DetroitPSLBasketball.com, which is free. And I was always super intrigued about the history of basketball in Detroit. And I've read like the sports pages of the Detroit or the Michigan Chronicle from when it started like in '36 into the '70s. The Detroit Tribune became a black paper back in '33, and I read those.
Yeah, I remember the Tribune.
The Chicago Defender before that for
Yeah.
the old black story, and then the Free Press and the News for the white story, which became the integrated story. And I've was able to meet a whole bunch of legendary old Globetrotters out of Detroit, and most of them have made their transitions now. But I've written their biographies, and I have a lot of Wjzz information and more on Detroit, the history of basketball in Detroit.
And you also are on the board of the Detroit Public Schools Athletic Hall of Fame.
Yep, in the Miller High School Athletic Hall of Fame, along with yourself. And
Well, the Miller High School Athletic Hall of Fame is almost the Detroit Public Schools Athletic Hall of Fame when I think about it, because you can talk about Miller. I mean, you're talking about Lorenzo Wright, Buddy Coleman, a world record 70 yards. Who else?
Fonville.
Charlie Fonville, a world record in the shot
Jenkins.
put, came out of Miller. Walt Jenkins, the great Walt Jenkins, another shot putter, played for the Detroit Lions and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. We're talking about a lot of guys that have passed. They were all good friends of mine too, you know. But anyway, we're not talking so much about Miller today as we are about the basketball history, the illustrious basketball history that I think a lot of kids today don't have a total amount of familiarity with in the city. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking about that today on WJZZ. So I know that you have researched all this. You've been doing this for how many years now?
Probably about 30 when I came.
30 years.
When I came
Wow.
in, I did it more intensely early on, but I definitely, totally humbly saying, nobody's read as much about the history of basketball in Detroit than I have, because I mean I've spent months reading all the old papers and putting together the Brewster Chronicle all-star teams, and we can get into all that because
Absolutely.
What made you want to do all this? Are you start doing a book or something, or you just?
I've contributed to.
You should do a book.
I've contributed to a couple Globetrotter books, Spinning the Globe, which was a real successful one. Ben Green did one about the 1948, the first time that the Lakers and the Globetrotters ever played, a book about that. I've contributed to a couple documentaries that have been on, like, for free. All the stuff's for free on ESPN about Goose Tatum, and we've got a big connection to Goose Tatum here in Detroit with
He's a Globetrotter.
Yep, and then also his own team.
What do you call his team?
Goose Tatum Harlem Road Kings.
The Road Kings.
And
That's right. Yeah.
His wife in Detroit was Lottie the Body Graves.
Oh yeah.
Burlesque
yeah.
dancer.
Yeah, dancer. Yeah.
I believe she's still with this awesome lady.
Wow.
So
That's
there's
amazing.
a whole bunch, and contributed to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's documentary on the.
No, he was in
Harlem
Detroit
Renaissance.
recently. I was over at the yacht club and had a moment of conversation with him. He's had some health problems.
Yeah.
AFib. Yeah, he was.
He's got a
yeah.
commercial talking
Yep,
about it.
that's right. I heard about that.
Yeah, yeah. So how far back? I'm also a historian too. I'm the official track historian.
Yes, you are.
for the city. But I also consider myself a boxing historian. And it bothers me that kids don't know a lot of this history. They need to know the basketball history, the boxing history, the track history, because Detroit was really best known in the old days for the kids who came out of Detroit who were basketball players or boxers or trackmen, usually sprinters, and that's not known. We know about Billy Sims, we know about Barry Barry Sanders. We know about Gordie Howe, whom I knew, by the way. We know about Night Train Lane. You know, we know about the pro teams. But the individuals who actually came out of the city of Detroit, we don't know a lot about. So how far back does your research in basketball go?
Yeah, because the game was invented in Massachusetts by Wjzz Naismith in 1898.
Okay.
And I tracked down, like, where did the basketball even come from for us? And there's a gentleman named Jacob Mazer, who probably is the person who brought it from Buffalo, New York. And that's so far back that it doesn't interest about anyone. But in terms of trying to make it a little more connectable to our time, prior to the Pistons coming here from Fort Wayne, Indiana, we had 12 different teams that played in 5 other leagues. One of them was actually just down the street from where we were sitting, inside the Pulaski Post. The building is still standing. But
we're in the 5,000 block of Shane. That's where our station is.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that a lot of Detroiters don't know is that the question is, like, where did the Los Angeles Lakers start? And for a lot of basketball people, they'll be like,
Minneapolis.
They'll say Minneapolis because they get the name, but they actually started in Detroit.
Did they?
They were originally the Detroit Gems, where people are like, what? And their 2 jewelers in Dearborn started the team, and their home court was predominantly the Holy Redeemer High School, which is now, I think, might be Crystal Ray, now charter school. But and then
good basketball program out of Redeemer too, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
So the NBA is a merger of the Basketball Association of America. We had a team called the Detroit Falcons, and the NBL, the National Basketball League, and the National Basketball League, which had, like, George Mikan, who was the first prolific big guy.
Oh yeah, they won the world championship. That was Mikan and what? Oh man,
Pollard was another.
What was Mikan's team?
He went to DePaul, but he played for the Lakers.
Lakers.
Yeah, and he was also a team called the Chicago American Giants.
Where were the Lakers?
At that time in Minneapolis.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jumping all over the place. But Wilbur King, who was a great track, football, baseball, and basketball player out of Pershing High School, he was one of the few African Americans that played in the NBL for Detroit, and they played against the Lakers. Our Detroit team that year was not good or profitable, and they were sold to Minneapolis. Minneapolis had 10,000 lakes. That's where the name Lakers come from.
When did Wilbert King run for Pershing?
In the late 30s.
Oh, okay.
He was a great runner, and then
I coached there, but many years later in the '60s. But I wonder who his coach was. It might have been Holmes. Might have been Carl Holmes.
I actually know the name, and I'm drawing a blank.
Well, Carl Holmes was the brother of my coach, David L. Holmes, down at Wayne State, and I succeeded him as track coach at Pershing in the fall of 1965. I think he would have coached Mr. King.
Wilbur King is one of our all-time greats. If you're just talking like all-around athletes, the late great Will Robinson said that Sammy G and Chuck Holloway out of Northern High School were the 2 greatest all-around athletes ever out of Detroit, and there's great arguments for them. Holloway ended up playing football out at UCLA and ran track at UCLA. And
he was a star hurdler at Northern, if I recall correctly.
In junior college, he did those sports, baseball, and I think rugby on top of it. And Sammy G was the first African American recruited by Notre Dame for football, but didn't go there. Ended up going to the Marines with his, Miller teammate Big Daddy Lipscomb.
It's another great Miller athlete, and Sammy G could run too.
Yes.
He played baseball and basketball. He could, and football. He could run. Sammy could really run.
But Wilbur King, one of the most infamous Thanksgivings ever. In the 40s, whereas like the Detroit Lions have control of the Detroit sports scene. Back then, the Harlem Globetrotters would come and play at the Brewster Center against our Brewster team, and during the daytime, Wilbur played for the Detroit Pioneers, which was sort of like a semi-pro black football team, and then at nighttime he played against the Trotters, and then afterwards they'd have the dance, and he used to dance. So that was probably he deserved a couple plates of turkey for that night. But that's Wilbur King. So I go way back, and like I said, so the Falcons, the BAA, the Basketball Association of America, which then absorbed the NBL like 3 years later and became the NBA. Those were our we've had, like I said, 12 teams before the Pistons came here from Fort Wayne, and those were a couple of those teams.
When did the Pistons come here?
I want to say 54ish, but I could be wrong.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Their gym, I think, is like a junior high where they played in Fort Wayne before they got here.
Okay.
But, once they got here, that's when I became sort of interested. But I'm way more interested in the 36 Harlem Globetrotters from Detroit, the 56 NBA guys from Detroit, the 13 ABA guys from Detroit, and then their backstory, like where they go to, middle school or elementary. That's the stuff that really.
When did Detroit really emerge as a basketball center? When did Detroit basketball players really start being known and becoming prominent?
Well, one comical thing, which definitely has a racist bent to it, is in the 50s we had a whole bunch of amazing players, but the white press was talking about how there really weren't many players. Detroit wasn't really producing good college basketball players, but in reality they were recruiting our guys, because like contemporary folks will talk about the late great Curtis Jones, who went to
Curtis Jones was one of the greatest. I mean, Curtis Jones may have been a better player than Ralph Simpson.
Yeah, Ralph Simpson and
I shouldn't. I'm sorry, Ralph, because
Ralph
you're going to see
this
this tape.
Mr.
But
Simpson.
Curtis shot the lights out against us one time. That was when I was coaching track at Pershing, and by God, Northwestern beat that Pershing team that later won the state championship, and we did go back and beat Northwestern in the state tournament. But that was in '67, and Curtis put on a display of shooting, the likes of which I don't think I had ever seen, excepting the time that the Highland Park kid beat my team from
Bruce
Berkeley.
Flowers.
We were Berkeley. That was when I was athletic director in the Berkeley schools, and we were ranked number 1 in the state. Well, we went into that game at UAD Stadium with Bruce Flowers, and we were expecting to roll over Highland Park. They destroyed us, and we were body checking him and everything else, and he was still swish, swish, swish. That was Terry Durod, and they put their cheerleaders behind our bench, which I got teed off about that. I was athletic director up at the stand. I said, get those cheerleaders out of there. They're rattling our kids. But we lost that game, and that was the state championship was decided right that night, because Highland Park went on with Durod to win the state title. But whichever team won that day was going to be the state champion. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing a little bit. Tell me more about how basketball became prominent.
It's still such an interesting digression, because your star was Bruce Flowers, who played at Notre Dame and played in the NBA.
Oh, yeah, Cleveland Cavaliers.
And when Durod was in college, he had a shooting slump, and he went back to Highland Park High School, and his high school coach, Gerald Percival, was rebounding for him. And that night, he just was shooting the lights out. And that night, after they left, the gym caught on fire. So the legend of Highland Park is Durod was so hot he burned the gym down. It's always okay. Reggie McKenzie calls Highland Park the capital of Detroit. So and Highland Park used to be in the PSL, the Detroit Public School League, as was University of Detroit. So I definitely give them some love too.
So was Hamtramck.
Correct, the Cosmos.
Yeah, Hamtramck with Bob Wingo and Leon Wingo. They were great sprinters out of Wayne State.
But you asked about when did we really emerge? The Globetrotters, I mean, NBA basketball wasn't a big deal. Baseball was king for so long, and college, Major League Baseball, boxing, even horse racing, college basketball, even high school basketball, they were all more prominent than professional basketball. The Harlem Globetrotters and the New York Renaissance out of Harlem were the ones that really started getting pro basketball going, and we produced so many of those. And I brought up Curtis Jones because taking nothing away from Curtis Jones, in the 50s, a guy named Murphy Summons, whose birth name his family name was actually Summers, but a typo on the birth certificate he rolled with Summons. When he could have been a senior at Northwestern High School, he was the dribbler for the Western unit of the Globetrotters. So, and when the papers were saying we didn't have anyone to produce, we weren't producing great basketball players. We had a 6'4" guard, which back then was unbelievable. Big Daddy Cool Breeze, they called him. And he was starring for the Globetrotters, and we had Ernie Wagner and Charlie Primus and Dr. Jumpin' Johnny Klein. I'll talk about them in a second.
Oh, yeah.
So we were
Klein,
producing,
one of my good friends for years.
Yeah. The Brewster Center which
You're
opened,
talking about dribblers. Talk
Yeah.
about Hall.
Bobby Showboat Hall.
Yeah.
Bobby Showboat Hall is someone who had the longest career of any Globetrotter. The last school he went to was down where Eastern Market is now, Russell School. He never even set foot in Miller. They would say
No.
he was there, but
Yeah.
he played over
No.
5,000 games with the Globetrotters.
Will Robinson did work with him, but he never played for Will. We used to talk about him a lot, and he also used to come to the Miller picnic, every year.
He was
until he passed.
he was
Bobby
totally
Hall.
beloved. He played.
Call him Showboat.
Yeah.
His nickname was Showboat. Bobby Showboat Hall.
He played 3 times more games than anybody ever played in the NBA. He played 5 years longer than any NBA player ever played. And if their seasons, they would have their regular season, then they'd play in a college all-star tournament, then they would do the international unit, and then some years they do a ballpark where they go play in the major league and Negro League and minor league stadiums. So every year he was playing hundreds and hundreds of games, played 27 years, 26 seasons. When Goose Tatum quit the Globetrotters in 1955, it's the second time the Detroiters saved the Globetrotters. Goose quit and went on the road. And I'll talk about that. He came to Detroit and got guys for his team.
Bill, you and I are talking so fast.
Sorry.
Char hasn't had a chance to ask one of the questions. Ask one of the questions.
Sorry, jump in, Char.
Well, I'm going to skip down because I have a question on top of this question. And
Okay.
it kind of goes. So,
All right.
the Globetrotters were created because black players were shunned from the pro leagues. Now, today, they have white people on the team. And to me, that is a slap in the face. Because we were created because they wouldn't let them play in the white people league, but then they let the white people come and play.
They got white people playing for the Globetrotters?
Yeah.
Yeah, some.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
And I don't like that, and that's kind of when I lost disrespect for the Globetrotters. But speak on how the Globetrotters came about. Speak on why they let, if you know, why
Yep.
they let white people
Yep.
on that team.
They weren't really from Harlem, I don't think.
No, they're in Chicago. The Savoy
Yeah.
Big Five was like a ballroom in Chicago.
Right.
And one of the things they did for entertainment or to bring in crowds is they play basketball games. And then after a few years, they went from being called the Savoy Big Five. Abe Saperstein, who's a Jewish American,
Yeah.
he ran the team, and he had black players, and they would go barnstorm all around. During the early years, there were times the guy named Bob Carson, who was a white guy, who was a good player, he played for them because during the war they would have a hard time getting players. So there were a couple white guys along the way back in the day that played, but it was, they were marketed as, the reason he used the Harlem name was to create the illusion that they were from Harlem, New York, 'cause that was the mecca of African American life. And then and nowadays they've had a few white guys, and I think mainly those guys were they were exceptional dunkers, so they had a little stint with them. No offense to the Globetrotters, 'cause I have a tremendous respect for their history, but after the integration, the slow integration of the NBA, the best African American players obviously transferred over to the NBA, but the Globetrotters kept the NBA alive. There would not be an NBA without them because they would play doubleheaders from the NBA's exception into really touching the 70s, but they were integral in the survival during the
the
late
Globetrotters
40s
had the crowds.
and the
They had
50s.
the crowds.
And the teams, they would originally the Globetrotters would play the warm-up game, but then the fans would leave. So then they got to the place where the NBA teams would play before the Globetrotters.
Yeah, right.
And the Globetrotters would play after.
They had the crowds.
Yeah, and no offense to the white players who are really, really great players. In order to, if you were on the Harlem Globetrotters and also the New York Renaissance, the New York Renaissance had a unit of about 8 guys, sometimes 10. The Globetrotters at their peak would have like 4 units out on the road. But for our Detroiters that played with the Globetrotters, they were the best of the best in the world because every black player out of New York, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Toledo, Detroit, their only choices for professional basketball were if they had the New York Renaissance, and they pretty much were only New Yorkers. the Globetrotters actually had tryouts, and people would come in from all over the Midwest, and then later farther out. So like our Detroit guys who played for the Globetrotters were the best of the best in the world.
No question about that. And, I got to tell you, back in '75, we were, I took the kids, Coach Steve Rhodes and I took the kids down to St. Cecilia because I wanted this all-white team in Berkeley. I wanted them to, be rubbing up against black players. So we played the summer league in St. Cecilia, and then we made a great run in the state tournament. We knocked off Finney, which had Earl Curitan, but then we came up against Terry Durad, and that was our Waterloo. But I remember that St. Cecilia league, and there was a league in New York too that was considered one of the top meccas for high school basketball, and where pros and high school kids all got together and played each other. What was that?
The Rucker.
The Rucker.
The Rucker in New York is like the most infamous one, and in Detroit, St. Cecilia, which unfortunately has ceased to exist some years ago, but St. Cecilia got going by Sam Washington, Jocko Hughes helped some other people.
Yeah, and Sam's son.
Yeah, right. Carried on after the rebellion, the riots in Detroit.
I get emails from the son every now and then.
Yep.
Yeah, he's still around.
And taking nothing away from St. Cecilia, in Detroit, when professional players like Isaiah Thomas and George Gervin, Magic Johnson, these guys would come and play at St. Cecilia. They were playing at St. Cecilia because they wanted to. Because by that time,
they called Gervin the Iceman. He was at
Butzel.
At Butzel, and he was also at King when I was coaching the track team there. Yeah, I tried to get him to come out for track, but he didn't want to. But he was a hell of an athlete too, But I interrupted you though.
You need to interrupt me, so I'll just keep talking. But in Detroit, we had the Noah Brown, who was at Wayne State.
I knew Noah very well.
Noah Brown, who played for Will Robinson at Miller. And
he was Miller guy, and then played at Wayne.
Yep. He had an outdoor league outside the Kronk. So Kronk is known for boxing, of course, but outside they had outdoor courts where for a few summers they had a tremendous outdoor league where Dave DeBuscher would play, Charlie North would play. Reggie Harding at the time, a 7-footer out of Detroit, was down in Nashville for prep school. He would come back and forth on weekends and play. But
Reggie played for Old Detroit Eastern. Bob Samaras was his coach, and they won
every year.
Yeah. Interesting. I taught Reggie Harding when I subbed at the Moore School for Boys. He was at Moore School for Boys when he was already a real tall kid.
Yeah.
So that was when I first met Reggie Harding.
But the Brewster Center, which is currently closed, their Sunday league, which was sponsored by the Michigan Chronicle, was unbelievable because back then, the players that either were about to play for the Globetrotters or had played for the Globetrotters, people that were going to play for the Goose Tatum Harlem Road Kings or did, football players like Len Ford and I think it's Bob Mann out of University of Michigan played for the Lions. Jesse Owens, who wasn't a good basketball player, but he played in the league.
Jesse Owens played basketball?
Not well, but down at the Brewster Center. So,
Jesse Owens signed an autograph for me when I was officiating the NCAA at Cobo Hall. He signed a program, and I treasured that autograph, but I did donate it to the Wright Museum. They've got the Jesse Owens autograph on that program, the NCAA. It was 1967 down at Cobo Hall.
Very cool.
Real humble guy. I actually I interrupted his meal because we were eating in this place and he was there and I had a program in my hand and I said, Mr. Owens, I've always been a real admirer of yours. I was born the year you won the 4 gold medals in Berlin. And he very, very nicely, signed that autograph, and I never forgot it. That was my only interaction with him, but I was in the presence of greatness.
Yes.
Track and field greatness.
But
Jesse Owens.
At the Brewster Center, our teams were sponsored by local places. Everyone dressed up their finest at halftime. They had fashion shows, unofficial ones for the ladies, and we were so good that when the Globetrotters would come and play us, they would either take players from our team before to weaken us, and then those guys would go play with them, or afterwards, and we beat them 3 times, and we beat them the last 2 times in a row, so the Globetrotters basically were like, okay, we're done.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They should have kept coming.
You're watching the Dr. John Telford Detroit Show, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching Wjzz Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. We have the Recovery Park Summer Concert Series featuring, so let's see, what's today? Oh, so this coming Saturday, July 25th, we've got Brandon Rose and Soul Therapy. And then Saturday, August 5th, we have Trifocal, and that's at Recovery Park, 5470 Shane. Tickets are available on Eventbrite, and you can also check out Recovery Park on Facebook. John, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. What is today? What's today's date?
26.
You said something's going to happen on the 25th. That's already
Oh,
happened.
I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah.
So this next one is Saturday, August 5th. Well, I don't know. The days just running together.
Yeah, they do that, and yes, I do. I do have something. I do have something. Miss Virginia Starkey, fondly known simply as V, the proprietress of V's Boutique, offers a wide range of fine clothing and accessories for ladies. You can find all sizes of women's fine apparel in V's one-stop excellent customer service at V's Boutique that you can't find anywhere else in Detroit anymore. V's is at 16423 East Warren Avenue, 16423 East Warren Avenue at the corner of Outer Drive, right around the corner from one of the few libraries that's still open in the city, and right around the corner from the old Alger Theater. So go to V's Boutique and get some of that fine, fine apparel.
And actually, I read the date wrong. It's Saturday, July 29th is the Brandon Rose and Soul Therapy. Okay, I'm good now.
Okay, anyway, we are interviewing Bill Hoover, aficionado of basketball, researcher of basketball, fan of basketball, in the John Telford Detroit Show today. And Bill, I have another question that I want to ask you. I want to ask you, for decades, blacks have been ostracized, and they've been.
That's what
but I want to talk about a little bit more about that and Detroit's role in breaking that color line.
The our 1951-52 Wayne State team, which is down the time you were down there.
No, I was down there from 54 to 58, but I knew all those guys. That 52 team had Ernie Wagner, it had Charlie Primus, it had those guys were all my good friends. They've all passed. Also Jumpin' Johnny Klein. And I'm going to tell you something about Jumpin' Johnny Klein that a lot of people didn't know. Number one, he high jumped 6'7" with the old Western roll, which was a record until Mark Smith broke it down there. Mark Smith was an All-American high jumper. But Jumping Johnny Klein, a lot of people don't realize, there are 3 people that make the Olympic team in every event. Jumping Johnny Klein in the Olympic trials in 1952, John Klein, who lived at my place in the River House, John Klein, finished 4th in the Olympic trials. He missed making the Olympic team by 1 place in the triple jump. What they called it, the hop, skip, and jump then, I think, but it was a triple jump. And I just wanted to get that in.
Which he had never
No,
competed
no,
in. He never competed in.
no.
Yeah, he was a stud.
Yeah, he was jumping over 50 feet.
He was a
triple
long
jump.
jumper and high jumper, and then at the Olympic trials, he's like, "Yeah, I'll try this," and he was 4th. He was
missed.
Bad man.
By a few inches. Yeah. By a few inches. He also could long jump 24 feet. This guy was and he was an all-around athlete. There's nothing Johnny Klein couldn't do. He was all-city basketball player at Northeastern High School before he came to Wayne and made All-American in basketball.
Right now we're sitting on Ferry, and just down Ferry, like it's so incredibly hard, obviously, to make the NBA or the Globetrotters, which was the equivalent back then. Jumpin' Johnny Klein and Ernie Wagner, who were both Globetrotters, grew up in the same building.
Yeah, they both went to Northeastern.
Yeah, and they lived in flats, but then Dr. Klein usually lived next door with his grandmother. So right on this street right here, these are guys that should have been just automatic NBA players. But back in 51, 52, there were 3 Harlem Globetrotters that were on the Wayne State team. Charlie Primus,
Right.
who was an All-American in college. Jumper Johnny Klein was an All-American in college, and Ernie Wagner. When they were playing, to just jump back to that Michigan Chronicle League, their first year, modern-day college players were allowed to play at the Brewster during their league. So Globetrotters, Andy Shepard and Webster Kirksey would come down from Eastern Michigan. We had our guys playing. So the St. Cecilia legend is awesome, but the Brewster League had the best black players in college playing in it, along with the just former pro basketball players, the Globetrotters, and the league was unbelievable.
And let me tell you something about Wayne State basketball. That may not have been the greatest Wayne State basketball team that ever played. It's arguable, because back in '56, which when I was a junior at Wayne State, on a track scholarship, I had a lot of buddies who were track men who also played basketball. George Brown was one of them, and he became a pro. And that team with George Brown and Clarence Strong, Baby Duncan, out of Highland Park, George Duncan. His wife worked with me at Butzel when I was department head there. They went 20 wins, 3 losses, went to the NCAA. If I recall, they beat DePaul, and they went up against Adolph Rupp's Kentucky.
You got cheated. Yes.
And that's right. The officials took the NCAA championship away from the first team that before Texas Western
Correct.
started 5 black starters. We had 5 black starters on that team. Probably arguably the best basketball team in the NCAA. But the Kentucky game was stolen from them, and Kentucky went on to win the championship.
Yeah. So
the coach was
Adolph Rupp. Or for us, Joel Mason.
Joel Mason.
Yeah. So before, what Dr. Telfer was talking about was another great Wayne State team.
And Joel Mason used to come and work with our football team at Denby. When I was at Denby, when I was an athlete at Denby. Joel Mason.
Joel Mason played professional basketball and professional football.
Yeah, he was a hell of an athlete.
But in 51, 52, even though I did a lot of research with this gentleman when they were living, possibly the first time that 5 black guys played together in a college basketball game was the 51-52 season, and for sure it was Jumper Johnny Klein, Ernie Wagner, Charlie King Snake Primus, Paul Dean, who was a big mentor and role model for
Paul
Johnny
Dean.
Davis, another great player.
Paul Dean was in the Detroit Varsity Club with me and Lorenzo Wright and Night Train Lane.
And then either Gerald Hutchins or Eugene Bolden were the 5th.
Gene Bolden, yeah.
So they
high jumper, by the way, high jumper for David L. Holmes.
They're the first ones to play together. So, and the very first guy to shoot a jump shot anywhere in college basketball in Michigan was Ernie Wagner again, who is a northeastern kid.
He was on that selection of the all. What do you call that group that you guys started with?
The Black Legends of Pro
Mike
Basketball.
Tiger Price.
Well, Black Legends of Pro Basketball.
No, I'm talking about the
Detroit Sports Zone.
Yeah, Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
For the.
So that's one of the things where where Detroit was significant in integration when we played 5 black players together at the same time back in 51, 52
So that was the first time then, huh?
Which was before the Texas Western, and that Texas Western team that
got all the publicity for doing it.
But they had a Highland Park guy in there, Bobby Joe Hill. So Bobby Joe Hill, when Texas Western beat Kentucky, which had Pat Riley on that team, the coach of the Lakers, that was again Highland Park's not Detroit unless you're Reggie McKenzie, who says it's the capital, but.
Reggie McKenzie.
So he's still
blocker for O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
Who probably, in my view, is maybe the best NFL running back there ever was.
Not named Jim Brown.
Well, Jim Brown was a fullback. I ran against Jim Brown, by the way.
It's
I don't know if I ever tell you that story.
It's a good story.
I got to tell you.
Yep.
I'll tell you this story.
Yep.
Wayne State had already won the 80 relay and the mile relay in Columbus, the Ohio relays. We go into Philadelphia at the Penn relays. And I'm anchoring against Jim Brown. I find myself anchoring against this guy. He was All-American football, track, lacrosse, and my teammates were Cliff Hatcher and Bullet Billy Smith and Ralph Williams from the island of St. Kitts. And coming into the finish of the 3rd leg, I'm anchoring. Wayne's in first place, by about 10 yards. We're in first place. So they put me in lane 1, and they put Jim Brown in lane 2 because Syracuse was running second. And just before I get the baton to take off, Jim Brown taps me on the shoulder and says, "You're going to need that lead, my man." That's what he said to me. But I pulled away from him anyway. But anyway, I thought I'd get that story in. And, we're both talking so fast. We keep it so Char can't ask any questions. So, Char,
I'm good. Go ahead.
You don't, okay, well,
let me ask about the 8th ever African-American to play in the NBA was Blaine Denning, who played at Detroit Northern.
Yeah.
And you mentioned George Brown. He was the 31st ever, and the 18 of the
he
first.
He also could high jump 6'4", but.
Yeah. The 18 of the first 31 black players in the NBA were formerly Harlem Globetrotters, and George Brown was a former Harlem Globetrotter, in addition to playing for the Lakers. And Blaine Denny was a Harlem Globetrotter who went on. And the integration of the NBA was super, super slow. And like I said, those doubleheaders with the Globetrotters kept the NBA alive by bringing the fans to their games.
So so the Globetrotters actually beat George McCann and the Minneapolis Lakers. They beat them, and they were the Minneapolis Lakers were the NBA champions.
Yeah. So the George Mikan, who was like 6'10", he was like the first version of a Wilt Chamberlain or a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Shaquille O'Neal. The Lakers played together the whole year as a team. They had a guy named Jim Pollard, who was also a Hall of Famer. They were fantastic, and Abe Saperstein, the owner of the Globetrotters, said, "Hey, let's play." So it was actually a doubleheader in Chicago Stadium. The night game that no one cared about was like the Chicago Stags against the New York Knicks, but the big game was the Lakers versus the Globetrotters. And back then, the stereotype was the opposite of it is today, where black guys couldn't play. And so the Lakers had already won they had a huge lead, and they eventually won their league, which was the NBL. That was before the merger of the BAA, and they also won the World Professional tournament. So they were thought they were nothing going to win. We had 2 Detroiters that came on that team, and what's so amazing is that Globetrotter team only had one college player who was the greatest dribbler in the history of basketball, Marcus Haynes, but they had Goose Tatum.
What about Bobby Hall?
Well, Bobby Showboat Hall, who was an amazing ball handler in terms
Marcus Haynes, I think Bobby Hall was as good as Marcus Haynes.
They were different positions. So the Clown Prince was a star role. So Bobby Showboat Hall, they say, could do more with his feet than most players could do with their hands, and he had all the tricks. And
he could dribble between his legs.
Of course.
Yeah.
But Marcus Haynes, in terms of flat out dribbling, was a bad man.
Okay.
So the Lakers have their team together that's all former college players and played together in pro leagues. Abe Saperstein takes his Eastern unit, which was the stronger unit at the time, takes the best players from the Western unit, which included Vertus Dollar Bill Ziegler from Northern High School and Wilbur King out of Pershing, brings them over. They play the Lakers, and they beat the Lakers. They thought it was a fluke. They played them a year later. Sammy G played in that game. And
beat him again.
They beat him again.
Yeah, well, Sammy G was.
Yeah, so
it's, Will Robinson. You said Will Robinson said Holloway was one of the greatest.
The 2 greatest all-around athletes out of
Will
Detroit.
picked Sammy.
Sammy and Chuck. Sammy and Chuck Holloway.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were both just phenomenal players. And Wilbur King, like I say, was a bad man as well.
Wilbur King came out of Pershing.
Yeah, Pershing Doughboy.
I was at Pershing. I had some horses there. We won the state mile relay in record time. We had Reggie Bradford. We had Andre Broadnax. We had, we had Johnny Kitchen. We had Tom Outlaw Jones. I came in there. Everybody said I was a great coach. No, I wasn't a great coach. I had some great runners is what I had. I had kids who could smoke at that school. They broke my Southeastern kids' mile relay record. I thought that mile relay record would never get broken, because that was with George Weston, who was my state quarter mile champion. And again, I'm digressing about track.
That's all right.
But okay, talk a little bit about Saperstein, because I understand that.
Let me do this.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're watching Wjzz Cool TV live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like us, follow us, share us, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching Wjzz Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Do you have something you got an announcement?
Well, I just want to tell everybody to get a hold of Lauren Hood and please, Miss Hood, put Toino Reeves on the reparations committee. I'm done fighting that battle now because I don't want to be dealing with Keith Williams anymore. He's hopeless. But try to put because we need Toino on that reparations committee because he's got the knowledge that is needed, in economics. And I'm not going to go into this again because I've beat it to death already, but I just want to get that word in one more time. We are interviewing. Go ahead.
Do you have something coming up that you want people to know? A book, a doc, something?
He's got to write a book. You got to write a book.
Oh.
That's
Sum
their
it up
reviewer.
for us,
Yeah,
minute and a half.
yeah. A couple people to pull for and by either writing letters or making calls to the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. Johnny Davis, who is working on a book right now. Johnny Davis went to Murray Wright High School, played at Dayton, played in the NBA, coached in the NBA.
So beat Johnny Davis to a book. You write a book.
He's working on it right now, and I'm trying to help him a little bit for free. He's doing just fine by himself.
Stop doing stuff for free.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's amazing how much you can do when you don't charge anything.
You
But
need
Johnny
to write a
Davis, Showboat Hall, I've nominated him for the Naismith Hall of Fame, the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. He should be in there. Our other Globetrotters who are in there are totally worthy.
Do they have Writers Halls of Fame for
Sure they do.
basketball?
They
Well,
probably.
you ought to be in there just
thank
for
you
a
very much.
researcher.
And let me say one more thing about Ralph Simpson. Ralph Simpson, who's
No.
the father of NDRA, but on his own right, he's an amazing player. He was the #1 player in the nation in high school.
Oh, I know. Let me
Yeah.
tell you about Ralph Simpson. He was one of my kids. And let
Great
me
story, the high
but
jump
he
story.
never high jumped for me. And one time I had the bar at 6'2", and my star high jumper was missing because we were working on the belly roll. Ralph comes in from baseball practice wearing stocking feet and a baseball uniform. Belly rolls over that 6'2" by about 6 inches, which would have been about 6'8" or 6'9", and then goes into the locker room and I chase after him. Ralph, come here, I want to talk to you. And he said, Coach, Mr. Telford, I'm not going to run track. But if he had, he would have won the state high jump. I just wanted to get that.
When he was at Michigan State, he averaged 40.3 points as a freshman. His 1 year on the varsity, he was 29 point something and 9.3 rebounds, 13 All-American. I'd love for him to have a push to get into the Michigan State University Hall of Fame,
Oh,
Michigan
he's
Sports
not
Hall of Fame,
in?
and the regular one. So I could go on, but
Oh,
thanks
man.
for listening to all my
He's not
talking,
in.
Shar and Dr. Telford.
Oh, okay. Are we?
All right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for being here. That was a good show.
Yeah, a very good show.
You've been listening to the John Telford Detroit Show with Dr. John Telford and co-host Charlotte Jones on WJZZ Detroit Internet Television, coming to you live every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. Also streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Contact Dr. Telford at 313-460-8272. That's 313-460-8272.